Oh, yay!
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you. I hope everyone else.
Excellent. Can all the people hear us? I hope so. Hello, all the people. Happy New Year for those inclined.
Yes, Happy New Year. It's the year of the
That's
ox.
why I'm wearing red for the New Year festivities.
Ah,
And I've always got gold things anyway, so that part wasn't hard, red and gold.
you like gilded things, don't you?
I do. I do like a bit of a gilded thing. Do you want to see my gilded vulva?
Yes.
Yes, they cried. Look at this.
Oh, that's lovely.
Isn't that lovely?
Oh my.
Oh, you can see my you can see my ring lights as well.
Yes.
That's
I just
and I also have a gilded penis, but I don't think I'm allowed to show that on the
uh,
Instagram because it's Instagram. We're trying to keep it family
family oriented.
family family oriented, family friendly,
Yeah,
family something. I'm just gonna turn up
we have
the
the
volume. I've turned up, but the
intimacy
volume.
opposed to sex and all that kind of stuff. So if we're speaking in a way that you know, usually I've got the mouth of a sailor. And I like
Which is why I love you. And I also have the mouth of a sailor and a fisher person. So between us, I think we're going to
yeah.
be all right.
So anyway, what I was saying was this is going to be the first in a series, and that
Yeah.
we are doing this every Friday from now
Mhm.
on out, every Friday from 12 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time.
Eastern.
Woo!
Yep.
Eastern.
8 p.m. in the UK, and then 7 a.m. Saturday morning for the Australians on the East Coast. Good morning, Australia, for those of you watching.
And so today we're going to talk about desire and libido, because if there's anyone that knows anything about how that works, it's Cindy Darnell. She has, which I've always loved, she has something called the Desire Series. To go to her website, and it sort of walks you through the myths about desire, how we can get our desire back, how we can
Yeah.
that into our relationships or just our relationship with ourselves. So that's cindydarnell.com, the desire series.
It's probably easier if folks just go to cindydarnell.com and then go to online courses and just follow it there. That's much easier, I think, that way. We're all about ease. We want to make sex easy. That's what this is all about. So if you can remember my name, then the rest of it's going to just roll off the tongue, as they say.
Okay, got some questions that came in.
Yeah.
And, I think the first question is a good one to start with. What are some misconceptions or some myths we've heard, or misconceptions we have about desire and libido?
Yeah, I mean, and that is so crucial, because I would say 100% of the clients who come to work with me about this issue, about 80% of the problem is the fact that they don't have enough information about desire, because most of what we know about desire, and when I say what we know, I mean, just what we absorb, through movies, through pop culture, through songs, it's all this kind of passion and heat, and if you're with the right person, everything just magically works out. And we really conflate passion and love together. So there's that story as well, that if somebody really loved me, then they would want me all the time. So these are some of the things. So we see this in in romantic comedies, that if the bumbling kind of, and often that has a very hetero narrative to it too. So there's the bumbling idiot man and the kind of chaste sort of fey woman, and he has to chase her, and if he doesn't chase her, then there's something wrong with him. And then if she gives in and yields to her desire, of course she's an SLUT. And of course we still have a problem with this shaming language. So there's a lot that goes into the stories that we believe about desire and how it's supposed to be. And then there's all the stuff also that we see and that we absorb from porn, when it's the hot plumber, the hot school teacher, the hot whoever.
Right.
And all of that stuff is fabulous too, but unless you are a professional porn performer, which maybe some of the folks watching this are, because they are our friends too. But even those people will say what they do at work is not the kind of sex they have at home. So a lot of what we absorb about sex and desire is through these pop culture stories, films, music, porn, and, you know, maybe bodice rippers, folks who read erotica, these kinds of things. Now, this stuff is great for fantasy. It's great to get your juices flowing. And it's also great to help you move in the direction of starting to work out, well, what do I like? Because desire is really about working out what you like. But if all you've ever known about desire is a version of passion that's been spoon-fed to you through the media, and if none of that really resonates, or if it used to work once upon a time, and then it stopped working, it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking, what's wrong with me?
Yes.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
What's wrong with us? And then we start going down a spiral of, oh my goodness, something's wrong.
Yeah, and there's
or worse still, our relationship's broken.
Right.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say, I know that we come from this place of there's got to be something wrong with me, especially say people with uteruses going through menopause, or menopause, or even during this pandemic where everyone is so stressed out after a year, 4 years of trauma. Nobody is really feeling it. And if they are, they're feeling it in a different way. So I'm wondering, even in normal times, why does desire change? And is it different for people with penises, people with uteruses? How does it work?
Yeah, look, I mean, it changes because that's the nature of it. So if your desire and if your libido, and I just want to clarify that we're going to use the words desire and libido interchangeably. They basically mean the level of interest that you have in sex. Sometimes folks get that conflated and mixed up with horniness. You know, how horny am I feeling? And one of the things that I really go into in the desire series is about how desire and horniness are complementary, but they're not the same. Because for a lot of us, we are familiar with horniness. We may have felt it once or 1,000 times, and we tend to think that that's what desire is. But what we know from sex research is that there are at least two kinds of desire. One is responsive desire, and another is spontaneous desire. Now, what we tend to see in porn and what we tend to see in a lot of romantic comedies is spontaneous desire. And that's that notion that you're just walking down the street and you see some hot thing and you're like, yeah, ready to go, and you just go in between the parked cars. Now that happens for some people some of the time, right? But for a lot of people, including people with penises, you need to have a context set up for the, you know, the good vibes and the sexy juju to start flowing. And this is the responsive desire. So responsive desire means we're responding to a particular set of conditions or a particular situation that allows you to slowly develop the mood. It's not something that just happens out of nowhere. It happens over time, and time could be 5 or 10 minutes, or it could be half an hour, or it could be, you know, an entire dinner. I often make the comparison with folks perhaps who go to the gym or, you know, do some sort of exercise, that you wake up in the morning and you look outside, as I am now, and the ground's covered in snow, and I think, I don't want to go out in that because it's too cold and it's much more comfortable in my bed, so I'm just going to stay here. But there's another part of me that kicks in and says, well, okay, I don't really feel like it, but if I put my shoes on and I put my coat on and I get out there, and once I start kind of heating up and once I start feeling it, then I'm really grateful that I'm out there. And then by the time I get back home, I'm really warm and everything's happening, and I feel really, really glad that I've done it. And it starts to become a different relationship that I have with this notion of being in the mood. I'm not in the mood really to go out walking in the snow, but once I'm out there, I'm like, actually, I'm really glad that I got it together enough to do it. So I often encourage people to start thinking about responsive desire as a little bit like that. You need to find the things that incentivize you to think, is this something I want to do? Now, when you talk about what changes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, why does it change through life? There's a lot of things that can affect it because it's so, you know, unlike what we see in pop culture, it's so fickle. It's so dependent on how we feel about our body. So body image, which is your thing. And so one of our lives, we will cover, you know, body image and the effect that it has. And that's really Elle's specialty. And, you know, then there's also your relationship to sex in general. Do you feel a bit icky about it? Have you had a good sex education? Do you feel a bit uncomfortable or ashamed? Do you feel like sex is for, you know, those kind of people, whatever those kind of people are, not people like you?
Right.
Or that you're a bit older now and your body doesn't do the things that it used to do. And, you know, maybe you're in perimenopause or postmenopause or no pause. You know, there's been some change. You've developed a chronic illness. You've had some major surgery. All of these things are going to have an effect on, you know, on your levels of horniness.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But the good thing about desire is that it's not dependent solely on being horny. It's about your relationship to sex, to pleasure, to touch, to sensuality, to aliveness. And this is the crucial thing that I think so many people get mixed up. So by the time they come and talk to somebody like me and they say, well, I don't feel horny anymore. And I say to them, guess what? Neither do I. And I'm a sex therapist. What do you think about that? So
yes, I know that conversation. Yeah.
So, yeah, so the changes can be all kinds of things. And I also think, you know, once upon a time, we used to think this was a woman's problem. And now overwhelmingly, the research really shows that this moves across genders, across orientations, across identities. This is not just, you know, this is not just a feeble kind of woman's thing. This is a human relationship to sex, pleasure, and desire that can really be addressed with education, with patience, and with communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And someone just said it's critical to know that you can reclaim it by embracing the change. And I think also people tend to not know that people with penises also have a hormonal change that goes on, but it's much, much less than people with uteruses. And so with all of our stuff going on, that is something to be thought of as well. Now, what do you do then if you are in a state of worrying about your desire and feeling like you're broken? And what do they do if they don't have an interest in sex, but they want to have an interest in sex?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a really common one. So many of my clients will say, I want to want sex again, or that their motivation comes from, you know, feeling like they need to do it because their partner is, you know, wants it, or, you know, that there's some motivation for them other than their own pleasure. And in the beginning, I absolutely say to them, that's okay. You know, whatever your motivation is to want to do something differently, that's good. In fact, that's good enough. And again, that we have this idea that we all have to be kind of juiced up and horned up and ready to go all the time. That's lovely. And that can happen. And certainly for folks for whom that is their template, go for it. It's fabulous. But there are a lot of people for whom that's not their template. It never was their template. They just want to be able to engage in sex with their primary partner or their main partner, or even just with themselves, you know. So there's lots and lots of layers of this. And so that notion of wanting to want comes from allowing yourself permission to think about not why don't I want this, like all the reasons about why don't I want sex, what's wrong with me, I don't know what's wrong with me, is it something that happened in my childhood? That's one part of the story, sure. But a much more helpful part of the story is, why do you want this? You know, why do you want this to change? Let's go into this. Because by the time you're taking an online course, or you're seeing a sex therapist, or you're doing something like this, you're invested. There's a little bit more there than a passing thing of waiting in the doctor's office, flicking through a glossy magazine and then putting it down. You're a little bit more invested at this point. And so that kind of enthusiasm, that kind of interest, guess what? That's desire.
Ugh.
That's exactly what desire is. So you have it. You already have it. And so then working with a professional who you click with, it's going to draw it out of you, and it's going to help you start to develop a relationship with that part of you that is a little bit frisky and a little bit, really? This is what desire feels like. It's like, yes, well, this is the beginnings of it, you know. So for folks, again, who are listening, who think, well, no, I do have an interest in it. And maybe, you know, I'm not climbing the walls with horniness, but my partner is. But if I can just lift my game a little bit. And also, too, this is something about, you know, in partnerships, too. It's not always about the lower desire person doing all the labor, right? We do have to recognize that sometimes partners who are the higher desire partners, they also need to do a little bit of work here, because again, like if you're a person who's not dating anybody and you don't want to, and it's just you and your hand and your toys and your dog perhaps, and you're happy with that, and that's fine. That's totally fine. And there's no reason to change that. But so often folks who are in relationships with partners where the desire is mismatched, which is very, very common. In fact, it's probably more common than not common. It often feels like the labor is on the person with the low desire, that they're the one who has the problem and they're the one who has to change. But in a relationship, it becomes a relationship quest. I don't like to call it a relationship problem as such, but it's a quest for the couple to go on together to help to find some sort of way of finding, you know, finding a cohesion between you that allows, you know, for the eroticism to start flourishing again, especially if it was there in the beginning. And especially for folks who had it in the beginning, I absolutely am certain you can get it back. Absolutely.
Yes. And, you know, I actually remember a time when I called you and I'm like, God, you know, I just have no desire to have sex. And I think I'm just going to be celibate and I'm going to be alone. You know, we all have those thoughts. And you said, well, do you have no desire to have sex? Or if someone came along that you were really attracted to, would you have the desire? And I went, oh, yeah. And so there is that difference, too.
Yeah. And that's a classic example of responsive desire. If the context is right, and in your case, the person is right, and that person came along and they had all the things and they said all the things and they smelt good and they did all the whatevers, then, you know, there it is, you know, and that's what desire is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's so amazing when you realize that. And yes, you're absolutely right. So how can we work to create desire and mismatched libido together? What are there some tools? How do you talk about it with your partner, or start something if you're not with a partner and you're home alone? How do you do it yourself? Cultivate that.
Yeah. Well, the main thing I think in terms of how to start is to really give yourself permission to look at it through a pleasure lens rather than a what's wrong with me lens. And so that's the thing about folks coming to talk about this problem is, first of all, I mean, you know, I acknowledge that it's a problem because you think it's a problem, so therefore it's a problem. So it exists, absolutely.
Acknowledging it.
And then, you have to acknowledge that something's not how you want it to be, and that's okay. You know, so the first thing is acknowledging that something needs to be, you know, done about the situation. And then the second thing is, you know, if you are in a relationship and there is a mismatch in desire, which, as I said, is very, very common and is not at all an indication that the relationship is falling apart. If you are the lower desire person, you could say to your partner, you know, I know that sex is important to you, and I know that pleasure is important to me, and sex used to be important to me, and I want for us to be able to talk about this. What do you think about us, you know, getting a book, taking a course, seeing a sex therapist, hiring a coach, something, taking a workshop, just to give us some tools to start talking about this again? Because when you're framing it through a lens of let's get more information about this topic, it allows both of you to sort of come back to an even place where you're not in combat with each other, where you're not one-upping each other, and there's no standoff, and there's no blaming and all this kind of stuff that is really corrosive to
Yes.
connection and to pleasure. When we can make it a shared project, when all people involved in the relationship are on board, and you know, and you make time for it, and you say to your partner, I want to make time for this.
Yeah.
I want us to learn about this. I want for us to get the skills. So you wouldn't attempt to, you know, start taking, you know, learning about guitar and taking yourself into, you know, classical guitar competition, having not invested in a few classes. You know, you wouldn't think twice about saying, I'm going to find a guitar teacher to show me this particular technique because I'm good at, you know, playing rock music, but I don't know how to do this classical guitar style. So you know, you hire somebody to help you with that. But in sex, we seem to have this blockage, this stigma that it's, you know, it's natural. And because sex is natural, or I used to be horny all the time with no help, and now I'm not. The thought of hiring somebody to help you is kind of like, what's wrong with me? And so we're coming at it from this what's wrong with me perspective.
Yeah.
And I really want to invite folks to flip that around and think, well, what's, you know, what's right with me?
Yes.
How can I access this? How can I look at this differently to give myself more information, to give myself, you know, the best possible chance of coming toward a solution that's going to be really workable for both of us? And that, I think, is the most crucial part of, you know, building a discussion around passion and desire, is the willingness to recognize, A, that there's a problem, and B, that you're both willing to fix it and you're both willing to put in the work and do what it takes to, you know, to level up, to upskill a little bit. And if you approach it, because I think sometimes too, therapy has a bit of a stigma to it, you know, so approach it more as education, approach it as something sort of a fun and, you know, endearing kind of valuing of the relationship. I think that that's a really good thing to do for each other, to say, hey, you know, I care about you and I care about us and I care about pleasure, so let's do this together.
Yeah, and you know, I think with intimacy, whether it's with yourself or with a partner too, it's a practice. I think people think of it as a goal.
Yeah.
Getting to sex, we have to start having sex, but it's a practice of sexual pleasure. And you know, I also think, like, if we started not feeling well and we went to the doctor, we'd make an appointment with the doctor and they're like, you know what, you're low in B and C and K. You just take vitamins again, you know, just take more of that. And so go to see someone about something that can feel overwhelming. And really, really large, to see a professional about that, or use tools, and to know that as we grow, our bodies change. Like I say with body image, it's a journey, it's a practice every day. You're not going to love your body, you're not going to love it all the time, but you have the tools to manage your expectations of your body. So with going to see a sex therapist about mismatched libidos or your desire, and it's a good fix, you know.
It really is. And the thing is, you know, that we have enough research now to help us really, you know, help clients get great results. And you know, and I think the good news too is that it doesn't really take that long, because a lot of the time it's just a couple of pieces of missing information. And when you've got those pieces of information and you apply them, you know, you can almost get results, you know, within a couple of weeks. And that seems to be the thing, because it's really, it's a mindset thing. And I can't overemphasize enough how important it is to, you know, recognize that it's a practice. It's an ongoing thing. You don't just do it once, you do it over and over and over, like with anything, painting, drawing, cooking, you know, yoga, whatever. You have to do it on repeat. But then it starts to become part of your life. And it's just something that you privilege along with everything else that you think is valuable in life. You know, we make time for it, we prioritize it. And sex and desire is no different. It has to be prioritized, and prioritizing it really through a lens of this is important, this is pleasurable, and this is how I want to feel.
Yeah.
Rather than what's wrong with me, what's wrong with you, we're all screwed and there's no point.
Yes. And I have to apologize. I didn't introduce you properly to everybody. And I want to, before we go on to the next question, I just want to tell everybody that Cindy is like world famous, world famous sex therapist. I know. True. Cindy Darnell is, you have what, like 14 master's degrees?
Not quite.
The sex therapist in Australia. And she's also the smartest person I know and the best sex educator and sex therapist I know. When I have a question, I go to Cindy. And I don't know where I'd be without you, to be perfectly honest, as a,
no.
and so at any rate, cindydarnell.com. And if you're interested in her Desire series, cindydarnell.com. And I think there's 30% off until tomorrow.
Yeah, I've all week this week, there's a 30% off all my online courses with the code Valentine's. And that's including the bundles that are already reduced anyway. So that's my Valentine's gift to all of the people. Because it's just so important that this information gets out there, and not everybody has the time or the resources to invest in individual sessions. And so this way you kind of get the best of my knowledge with worksheets and videos and opportunities to ask questions within the school anyhow, that I can come and answer them. So it's a way for folks to be able to get access to this information without, and it's all pre-recorded, so you just do it in your own time zone at home. It's all ready to go. It's all there. So.
Yeah. And maybe you get a little hot and bothered during it and you could just put it on pause.
Yeah, maybe.
Who knows? We have just a few minutes left and I wanted to get to
gosh. Oh, we do. Look at that. So much fun talking about the sex. But we're gonna be back next week, next Friday at the same time, every week for, until we don't turn up anymore. Talking about the sexes.
Talk about the sexes, and we'll come up with a topic for next week. It might just be the same topic because we get a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But keep following me and Cindy, and we'll let you know what the topic is. And as always, you can send us a question that you'd like answered. And which the last question that we had is how to increase your libido after hysterectomy, cancer, chemo, something like that.
Yeah. Look, I think, when we're looking at chronic illnesses and chronic pain, it is going to be a slightly different approach. I mean, the approach is still pleasure-centered. So no matter what, the pleasure-centered element is always there. But with chronic illness, chronic pain, aging, body changes, any of these things, it's really helpful to recognize that, over our lifetimes, these amazing vehicles that we call our body, they change. And they do stuff that we may not want them to do, or they do stuff that is not what they used to do, or they don't do stuff that they used to do. And so sometimes, there can be an element of grieving that has to happen before we get to the sexy part, allowing the history of what was once there to be and to sit with the grief before we start moving on to changing things. Or for folks who are sort of in the past the grief stage, if that was part of their journey, to again always think about it through the lens of pleasure. And if it means, well, what sort of things do I need to help my body be comfortable? Do I need different kinds of pillows and wedges? Do I need more lube? Do I need toys with longer handles or bigger buttons? Or do I need a lot more massage and I need a lot more time? I need a lot more kisses. Do I need a bed that's higher up so I don't have to bend so much? A lot of it could also be making sure that we change, our physical environment. Are we warm enough? All the things that we need for our body to feel safe and comfortable, particularly if there has been some sort of, medical trauma and recognizing that it takes the body some time to bounce back from that, and that even if it doesn't go back to how it used to be, there's still a lot of opportunities of pleasure that can come to you if you're willing to recognize that pleasure has many, many faces. And as you go through life, it's an opportunity to learn about different ways that your body responds to pleasure. So the sex that you had perhaps as an able-bodied 20-something is not going to be how it is if you're post-cancer, post-chemo, illness in your 40s, 50s, 60s. It's just not going to be the same. So allowing yourself the room to drop those expectations, but also increase your willingness to explore pleasure and to learn about what some alternatives are, is going to be a really, really helpful thing to do, to be able to normalize the process of what's going on, and to recognize, like I said, for some people there can be a little bit of grief mixed in that too, and we have to be able to acknowledge that yes, the pleasure is important, but all of the rich textures, sex brings up so many emotions for people, unlike horniness. And and we have to be able to sift through all of these things, especially when sex has become a source of discomfort and unpleasantness for us, which again, in the spectrum of normal human sexuality, is completely normal.
Thank you so much, Cindy. This has been amazing to have you, and I cannot wait to keep doing this.
Yes.
It's going to be so much fun, and sadly I have to go, but maybe next time.
I have to go too.
Yes, you do. But thank you, everybody who joined. And
yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and we'll be back on Friday at same time, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m.
UK, 7 a.m. Saturday, Australia.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you later.
Bye.
If I can figure out how to turn this off.
Okay, bye.
Bye.